Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Thursday, so welcome to another Thursday Endgame video. Today Kira is with me. Lucia and I got a dog 2 days ago, and Kira is very young. She's 4 months old and she's very scared. So we try to be with her all the time. She's very afraid of people. She's just getting to know us. She knows Lucia much better than me already. And yeah, this is what she does here. Yeah, she sleeps on us when we work, when we do anything. So I will hold her here. Kira, it's okay. Okay, so yeah, she's just getting to know people. When we go for a walk and she sees somebody, she freezes. And I don't know what somebody might have done to her, but I'm guessing there's a reason she's afraid of people, but she's much better already. So anyway, today we are going to go over Knight versus Rook endgame. Last week we went over Bishop versus Rook, which is slightly simpler to draw and there are less rules. Kira, it's okay. Here. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry about this. It's going to be like this for a few weeks, I guess. Lucia cannot hold her now, but yeah. Anyway, today we are doing Knight versus Rook, which is slightly more complicated, but still, if you know what you're doing, you should be able to draw. And especially if you are not starting, yes, that's a microphone, in one of the worst positions possible, which is in the corner. So I have divided this video into 4 ways you could lose this, which I think is the best way to explain how to draw. Now, this endgame is a draw. If you have the knight and king in the center, then it's a draw unless you decide to lose. I'm going to show you how you can try to lose. But in some unfortunate positions you lose. There are 4 ways to lose. We are going to go over each. Before we do that, you might be wondering why I have a rook and pawn position on the board. The reason for that is that rook versus knight often occurs out of rook versus pawn endgames. There is a technique or a requirement, a drawing technique, where you under-promote into a knight to be able to draw. This is just one such position which I chose to illustrate what I'm talking about. In this position, black plays king to f1, and after king to f3, threatening checkmate, of course. We don't play g1 equals queen, because g1 equals queen loses to a mate in 1. Instead of that, we play g1 equals knight, with a check on the king. And now we have one of the thematic knight versus rook positions, which is draw, where even though the situation looks very unfortunate for black, and even though both the king and the knight are on the rim or on the edge of the board, it's still a draw. So in this position, the white king, if it goes to g3, we check it again. When it goes to e3, we now play knight to h3. And after, let's say, rook to h2 attacking the knight, we just go back to g1. It's okay. It's okay. Do you want to go down? Okay. I think she wants to go and drink some water. Oh no, she just wants to sleep. She wanted to lie down on my lap. Okay, so this technique is fairly common. We are going to look at a position like this in a bit more depth. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that from rook and king versus pawn and king endgames, there is often this technique of under-promoting to a knight, which then leads to a draw. Okay, and she's off. Okay, yes, okay, everything is okay. Okay, so coming back to the original position, remember this technique. And if you remember this technique, you will still have to know how to draw, especially because once you under-promote to a knight, it is going to be on the edge of the board, and both your king and knight are going to be on the edge of the board. Now, let's go over the simplest way to lose this position. Let's start with a normal central position. So let's say we start here, and now we have a very drawn endgame in which, since the king and knight are both in the center, this is an easy draw unless you decide to lose. So let's look at how to hold this position and what can happen so that you lose. So let's say rook to a1, knight to c6, king to e4, king to d6, and what I'm doing here is keeping my knight and king close together. This is the easiest way to draw, and the most important rule you have to remember. When playing with the knight and king against rook and king, keep your knight and king together. If you separate them, two things can happen. Your knight is going to get trapped by the king and the rook. If the knight is cut off from the king, the rook and king can chase it and then close it off and win it. Or B, your king gets checkmated because you're basically playing a king and rook versus king endgame, and that's an easy defeat. So let's say rook to c1, knight to e7. White is making absolutely no progress. Rook d1 check, king e6, no progress. Keeping your knight and king together makes it very hard for your opponent to make any sort of progress. If he'd checked, then knight c6. In this position, now let's try to lose this position. Okay, king to c7, that's a good move. King to d5. This is a technique I wanted to show you, and this is a way to try and win these positions. The way to try and win is to force a double attack on the knight using a pin. So in this position, the drawing move for black is king to d7. I'm going to show you why in a second. For example, king to c5 check, king to c7, and there is no way for white to make progress. If in this position after rook d1, king c7, king d5, we play king to b7, we lose because of a very simple trick of a double attack on the knight. So how do we do this? We check. Rook to b1 check. The king is forced to go to c7, otherwise we lose the knight. And after king c7, we play rook c1, and the knight is lost. So the easiest winning technique in the center, even though it doesn't work unless black obliges and blunders, is to keep your king on the side of the knight. So not in front of the knight, in this case not on c6, but on d6, not on c5, but on d5 or b5, in which case if the black king wanders too far on the wrong side, we could pin the knight, win the knight, and game over. Okay, that's the first way to lose or try and win. The second way is keeping the knight on one of the most unfortunate squares, which is in black's case, well, it doesn't, yeah, actually, what I wrote on the screen on the right is completely redundant. A knight on g7 or b7 for black and g2 and b2 for white. It doesn't matter for either color. It's lost regardless of which color you play. So the reason for that is the knight is easily cut off on these squares. So in this case, if you had to find a good move, what would you do? The reason why the knight is poorly placed on these squares is because you can restrict it easily. So the move is rook to d1. In this case, of course, we are restricting the knight from d6 and from d8, and there is no way for black to save this position. Well, black only has two moves, king a8 and king b8. If he moves the knight, he loses the knight. So let's say king to a8. This is we can easily prove that this is lost. We play king to b6, and after king to b8, which is now the only move, we simply play rook to d7, and the knight is lost. The knight cannot get away. It's not pinned, but it doesn't have any squares. So let's try a bit more resilient move for black. So after rook to d1, we play king to b8. The reason why king to b8 is better is because it gives us an extra square, so we don't have such an easy time winning this position. Here, king to b6 would actually lead to a draw with a position where the knight is on the edge of the board. So if we play king to b6, black draws easily with king to c8. And now we have a position similar to what we saw here, promoting to a knight. Just give me a second. Okay, g1 equals knight, and we have a very, very similar position to this if you compare the two positions. This is basically the same, and after king to c8, if we go rook c1, for example, king to b8, there is no way to make progress. If you try to go rook h1 to deliver checkmate, then simply knight to d8. Once you check, the king will cover. Once you pin the knight, the king will cover, and let's say rook to h8. King to c8, and now we have the drawn position where the king and knight are on the edge of the board. This may seem tricky, but it's a draw. Okay, so let's look at what white should be doing. Okay, so in this position after king to b8, there is a simple winning technique, and we are going to use this technique to drive the knight away from the king. This is how you exploit the position in which the knight is on one of these 4 squares. Okay, so we play king to a6. King to c6 also works, but king to a6 is more precise. What are we doing here? Remember the position in the center? I'll show that to you again. So here, we want it to be on the side of the knight, to be able to double attack it with the rook. That's the key. That's the key thing. So in this position, we don't want to go on b6, because then we don't have rook to b1, obviously. So yeah, there's nothing he can do. So in this position, if he tries king to c8, trying to run away, then of course we play rook to c1 check, and after king to b8, the same thing as when the king was in the center. The same thing, same winning technique. So after king to a6, the knight is forced to separate from the king, therefore being lost basically. So knight c5 check. Let's say king to b6. Knight a4 check. The knight doesn't have any good squares. We are now threatening both mate and the knight. So if the knight, for example, goes to e4, then rook to d8 checkmate. So knight a4 check. He has to run with checks. King c6. Knight c3, and now the knight doesn't have any more squares. Rook e1 is a very, very strong move. Remember this. When you see 2 squares the knight could go to on a file 2 squares apart, 2 files apart, just cut it off. Cut it off and game over. So in this position, no more squares. For example, knight a4, rook to e3, cutting the knight some more. Knight b2, rook b3 check. Of course, the skewer here. Anything else just loses immediately. Okay, so that's when the knight is on g7 or on b7. Let's look at one more position with the knight and king on the back rank. This is, as I said, a draw, and this is what you're going to get most often. This is most progress the side with the rook can make if you don't deliberately go into a corner, which you don't have to do. Okay, yes, okay. So yeah, in this position, remember what we did last time. When we are in this zugzwangish position, we check the king, king to f3, knight to e1, we just repeat. We don't go up with our knight, so in this position after king f3, we don't go knight h4, that would be insane. You don't want to separate your king and knight, you go knight e1, just go back. And after king g3, we have no more checks, but now knight d3, and after, for example, rook to d2 attacking the knight, just knight e1 back, and that's it. The knight is very good at preventing checkmate, so it's very hard for the black king to remain on f3 to threaten a double threat of rook d1 checkmate and winning the knight. So, for example, in this case, if you want to lose this position, let's say knight to b4, you separate your knight and king. Now, this is not a loss in 100% of the cases, but it's much easier to lose. So the simplest strategy is just to keep your king and knight together on the back rank. King to f3, for example, threatening mate. So you have to go king e1, king e3, king f1, and now you lose. Rook d1 check, king g2, rook d6, and that's it. It takes some time to win this knight, but you can see that the knight isn't going past this square, and that's an easy winning technique. Cutting the knight off in a square and then rounding it up. Okay, and finally, the positions where the knight and the king are both in the corner are lost all the time. It's almost impossible to draw them, regardless of the constellation of the pieces, whether the knight or the king are in front, whether it's black or white to move, it doesn't matter, it's always lost. So I'll just show you a few reasons for that. So let's look at this position, for example. This is a mate in 1. There is no way to save the position. Of course, black shouldn't really play rook to c1. That would be disastrous because of stalemate. But of course, rook to h2 checkmate works. Or, for example, this position where black is in check, but it doesn't matter, just king to f3. And now again, you are in zugzwang. If you play king f1, I mate you on c1. If you play knight f2, I take it. If you play knight g3, I take it. So the knight, as we know, doesn't have scope in the corner, and of course when the opponent's king is close, then cutting off both squares the knight could reach from the corner is fairly easy. And finally, this example where again the knight is on an unfortunate square. on g2. So for example, rook a1 check, knight e1 and checkmate. So it doesn't really matter which side it is to move. In this case, if it was white to move, white would either lose the knight or get mated, or both. So if, for example, knight e3, then rook a1 would force knight a1 and takes. If king g1, then of course rook a1 and knight e1 and rook takes, checkmate. So when both pieces are in the corner, it doesn't matter which piece is in front, you basically lose. So to sum this up, knight versus rook is a very easily drawn endgame. The technique you have to remember is never go into a corner. If you can manage, just run away from the corners. Being on the edge of the board is not risky. You can draw easily. Just make sure that if you are on the edge of the board, you don't separate your king and knight. You only check when you have to. You keep them together on the back rank, and don't wander away with your knight too far, because if you do, there's a high chance that your knight is going to be cut off into a square and eventually rounded up and won. Okay, I hope you got something from this video. Remember these 4 winning techniques. Of course, these endgames are usually a draw, but they have been won. They can be won, and sometimes when your opponent underpromotes into a knight, he is already in an unfortunate position, and it's going to be a matter of one tempo to make sure that you don't allow it to escape. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you tomorrow for the middle game video, and stay tuned for more chess. Thank you very much. Bye bye.